A very warm welcome to all of you to the Vienna Migration Conference 2020. 2020 is a special year. The corona pandemic keeps all of us occupied and many of us in some form of extended lockdown. It goes without saying that we would have liked to hold our conference in the good old-fashioned way, in one of the grand meeting halls in the wounded yet beautiful city of Vienna. However, like so many other fora, we are forced to organize this year's edition in an online format. 2020 marks the 5th anniversary of the Vienna Migration Conference. In the short period of 5 years, the VMC has become a prime occasion and meeting point for the broadest range of migration stakeholders: politicians, public officials, civil society, private sector, media, thinkers and doers. A platform for top-level debate on migration in Europe and beyond. It offers an indispensable opportunity to take stock of the latest developments in migration and dive deep into the most relevant issues affecting migration and mobility, both from a policy as well as from an operational viewpoint. 2020 is a seismic year of change. Challenged by months of the devastating pandemic, it may turn into a transformative year. After intensive preparations, the EC has now tabled the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, and with it, it has outlined its reform plan for the EU's asylum and migration systems. The VMC 2020, consequently, is devoting parts of its program to the key aspects of the new Pact, including fast-track procedures at the external borders, the prospects of making the EU's return policy more effective. We are looking at the state of Schengen, and we're going to explore the external dimension of migration, international cooperation and partnerships. We are going to explore labor migration and talent partnerships, technology and migration, and many other topics. Please check the VMC website for more information and regular updates. Last year, we have discussed possible ways out of the gridlock migration policy making was caught in. During this conference, we will explore whether the keys have now been found that will unlock this gridlock. In other words, whether the wide-ranging proposals on the table will lead Europe and its partners out of the widely perceived crisis, or whether Europe will finally and ultimately fall apart over the issue of migration, as some pundits may augur. Much of the year was affected by the corona pandemic. Consequently, the corona crisis will be a red thread throughout the discussions over the next 4 days. We will explore how the pandemic will impact on migration dynamics, how it will affect policy debate, and what all of this means for international cooperation and partnership. For the online premiere and our 5th anniversary, we have developed a rich and diverse program, and we have developed new formats. You can mix and match the different segments to create your own tailor-made VMC 2020 experience and integrate it into your daily agenda and participate from your office, your home office, or elsewhere on the go. Of course, you may also choose to follow the conference in its entirety. Another key feature of the VMC is its broad debate. We aim to connect the participants in the quest for good migration policy and cooperation. We have made arrangements that you can engage in the debate in different ways, via the commenting functions on the VMC platform, via social media, and here especially Twitter, via polling functions and other features. Please make use of these functions and actively engage in the debates. We have spared no efforts to design a relevant, interesting and lively program that meets all our expectations and lives up to the standards that we have grown accustomed to in relation to the VMC. A good indicator of the standing and the value of the VMC platform are the high numbers of registrations. More than 1,700 registered participants follow us over the next 4 days. The event wouldn't be possible without the fearless and dedicated VMC team under the lead of my colleague Karin. A big thank you goes out to her and the many colleagues inside and outside ICMPD who have supported the organization of the conference. And I would extend my gratitude to all the discussants who are part of the program as well. I would also like to thank our partners and sponsors who have supported the organization of this year's conference, the Austrian Ministry for Education, Science and Research, the Swiss State Secretariat for Migration, and our partners at the ORS. And I would like to thank all participants for joining us. It is now my pleasure to announce today's opening program. In a short moment, ICMPD's Director General, Michael Spindelegger, will moderate the opening session in which the Swiss Federal Councillor for Justice and Police, Ms. Karin Keller-Sutter, and the Minister for Home Affairs of the incoming Portuguese EU presidency, Mr. Eduardo Cabrita, will debate the transformative dimension of this seismic year of change. After this, we will have another highly interesting afternoon debate between two thinkers and movers. The Krustev-Selmayr debate on how COVID-19 is changing the world, Europe, and migration. This is moderated by ICMPD's Head of Policy, Marlene Frankenhäuser, who's fresh from maternity leave. So stay tuned for what I believe will be a very interesting afternoon. And it's now my pleasure to formally open the Vienna Migration Conference 2020 and to hand over to ICMPD's Director General, Michael Spindelegger.
Thank you, Lukas. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to the first virtual edition of the Vienna Migration Conference, to our participants and the high-level speakers who are with me today. The VMC marks the highlight of ICMPD's calendar every autumn. This year, I know, regular participants will miss the networking and social opportunities that our annual conference is well known for. Please don't despair. We will see you all next autumn in person for a grand reunion here in Vienna. 2 weeks ago, a terrible terrorist attack took place very near our headquarters. But Vienna is and will remain an open, confident city full of life, energy and culture. We are not afraid. At the Vienna Migration Conference last year, health issues did not feature widely as a topic, either on the agenda or in our discussions. 1 year on, 50 million people are worldwide infected with COVID-19 and over 1.2 million have died. Health systems remain under terrible pressure. Amongst other things, the economic impact here in Europe, as everywhere else, is huge and people have lost a lot, with migrants, of course, being particularly vulnerable. Sectors like tourism and travel are in serious trouble. Schengen area is partly closed. So we have to ask ourselves, is it still relevant to debate migration and mobility issues at a time of lockdown and social restrictions? As we will hear in a little bit, it is more relevant than ever because it is more difficult than ever. So with reports of a possible waking on the horizon, I decided to keep our annual conference tradition and go ahead with this online edition of the Vienna Migration Conference. For the next 4 days, ICMPD's main stakeholders, top professionals from governments, international organizations, the media and civil society will come together as we always have, to take stock of what has been a year of seismic change in the world, in Europe and in migration policy. I want to thank Director Lukas Gerke and his team for seizing the opportunity in adversity to present the best ever VMC program. In terms of content, we have a star-studded agenda for you over the coming 4 days. I also want to thank ICMPD staff, over 300 people active in nearly 90 different countries, for their professionalism and adaptivity during the pandemic. You kept delivering on migration for our member governments and partners no matter what. Please stay safe and keep up the good work. The main themes of this year's VMC are Schengen, asylum reform and Europe's migration diplomacy. The EU's debate over migration and integration is back. In September, European Commission presented a new pact on migration and asylum for reform of European migration and refugee policies. As I speak, Germany is pressing hard as EU presidency for a political agreement by the end of the year. And President Macron from France just 2 weeks ago has called for an overhaul of the Schengen area itself, an issue that links up with our own policy program here in ICMPD. To help us put these and other important developments in context, we have Mrs. Karin Keller-Sutter, Federal Councillor of Switzerland and Head of the Justice and Police Department, and from Portugal, Minister of Home Affairs and incoming President of the Justice and Home Affairs Council, Mr. Eduardo Cabrita. Unfortunately, due to the current situation, it was necessary to discuss with both ministers separately and a little earlier. First, Mrs. Keller-Sutter joined from Switzerland. Let's hear what she had to say, the challenging of managing borders during the pandemic, and her thoughts on the Commission's new pact, migration.
The decision was the one to close borders because we are really used to open borders. We are a Schengen associated member, and I come from the region of the Lake of Constance, which is very interconnected socially, economically, culturally, and to have fences all of a sudden in the middle of parks in the city of Constance, this was a very new experience. And there was a lot of protest also against the closing down of borders in the region or in the regions themselves that were concerned in Switzerland by the closing of borders. And I was quite happy to see that, because this showed me that people really see the importance of freedom, and they protested for freedom, the freedom of travel. I think this was a very difficult decision, but I think that the general lockdown was difficult, because when I became a member of government, I always said that I was appointed to protect the freedom of the people in Switzerland. And all of a sudden, we really had to restrict the freedom of movement, the freedom also of demonstrations, and we had to close down shops, restaurants, which of course very much had many consequences also on the social life.
Thank you so much for this perfect overview, but could I ask you, what did you find were the toughest trade-offs you had to make this year?
Well, it was certainly very tough to manage the crisis as a whole. Also in the Federal Council, in our government, we had very tough times. We really had to organize, together with the cantons, also the management of the crisis by the hospitals. I mean, we had to assure and be sure that people got the treatment they needed, on the one hand, and we had to make choices, sometimes between the lockdown on the one hand and economic consequences, and on the other hand to protect people's lives. That was not always easy, and of course we had a lot of politicians and organizations and so on that had different views, and as every government, we were very much under pressure to really find the right way. And as I said, it was the management of the crisis itself, but then the decisions we had to take, like the decision to close borders, which is very hard. To restrict the freedom of movement, which really is something that was, this is a symbol of the freedom of the people of Europe, that they can move freely between our countries.
Thank you so much. I think you're totally right with that. But turning to the European policy, I think what Switzerland brings in is decades of experience in developing innovative migration policy. And you are not a member of European Union, but you are within the Schengen system, and you are part also of the European asylum system. So How do you react to these new plans from European Union, especially this Pact on Migration and Asylum? Are they on the right track? What do you think about that?
Well, I can say that Switzerland very much welcomes the strategic directions of the new Pact on Migration and Asylum. We all know that Europe has so far not succeeded in building a crisis-proof asylum system, nor in achieving a fair distribution of responsibility. And for this reason alone, Switzerland welcomes the fact that this package finally represents a serious attempt to change this. And this is also a basis of debate within the European Union, but also with the associated members of the Schengen-Dublin area. And, you know, Switzerland has a great interest in a functioning, efficient and resilient asylum system in Europe. And the Commission's proposals take up many issues of importance, such as a fair and also fast asylum procedures, at the external borders, a reinforcement also of the protection of these borders, as well as compensating measures to support Dublin states under particular pressures. I mean, we talk about Greece, Italy, Spain, and Malta mainly. And you know, Switzerland plays an important role within the Dublin system because of our geographical position in the middle of Europe. So I can say we welcome the step-by-step approach proposed by the presidency, and we hope that a political agreement on the core elements of the new proposals will be reached as early as in December, as Horst Seehofer actually said, and he would like to achieve this goal, and we hope this will become a reality. Now, you know that the question of solidarity is a tricky one within the European member states, and this is a consensus that is certainly very challenging to find. But Switzerland, as far as we are concerned, I can say that we are ready to play a constructive role in this process and support also the efforts of the Commission and the Presidency. I would also like to stress the fact that Switzerland has proved repeatedly that we are ready to support in crisis situations. We did so in relocating 1,500 persons from Greece and Italy during the migration crisis of 2015-16. And we also have accepted a total of about 80 unaccompanied migrants from Greece this year. So Switzerland is, to put it in a nutshell, very much looking forward to the discussions and hopes that really in December we will achieve the goal that Horst Seehofer would like to get to.
Mrs. Keller-Sutter, I think you are totally right. Within the negotiations, to find a way for meaningful solidarity will be one of the main issues where you have to find a compromise. Of course, I think maybe looking to Switzerland, we could also use your experience, because Switzerland is a federal state. You have strong rights from the region side, you have a federal government, and maybe we could also look how you are going to organize, because also within Switzerland you have decisions made by the federal government, and of course you have the regions to be responsible for organizing daily issues for migration. How do you organize that? How is this relationship between federal government and the regions in Switzerland?
Well, in fact, I can say we have a system in Switzerland of burden sharing, as you said, between the regions. We call them the cantons, the provinces in Switzerland we have, and the federal government. But I would like to call it rather common responsibility. But I mean, this has not always been the case. This is a system that has been developed over the years. If you look back to the 1980s, asylum seekers would lodge their claims directly with the cantonal authorities. Whatever canton received the claim was responsible for the asylum seeker, and so asylum seekers could basically go wherever they wanted to go, to the canton and region of their choice. And this, of course, led to tensions between the cantons, as especially cantons near the Swiss border and those with major urban centres found themselves in charge of a disproportionate number of asylum seekers. Then later, subsidiary federal competence was introduced, and if the cantons could not agree on certain criteria for the distribution of asylum seekers, the federal government was given the power to decide on the criteria for them. But today it is all changed. Today it is the federal government that basically receives the asylum claims, accommodates the asylum seekers for a certain duration of the accelerated procedures, and only then, you know, if they're not entitled, probably not entitled to get asylum, they're distributed to the cantons if necessary. And this distribution is basically proportional to the population size of the cantons. Now, in addition, the cantons that provide additional services, like hosting a federal asylum center on their territory, they're given a kind of discount. They don't have to receive as many asylum seekers as other cantons have to, that don't have a federal asylum center. And our current asylum law, this is the basis for the accelerated procedures, states all these mechanisms in detail. And this was, in fact, the key to getting the necessary political momentum behind our new asylum system. And today, the federal government really has a strong role. But this strong role is also based on a strong, very strong partnership with the cantons. We cannot work without them. And the federal and cantonal authorities also work very closely on matters of return of asylum seekers that have to leave Switzerland. And this ensures also that those people who are not in need of protection have to leave Switzerland. And here also there's a very strong cooperation with the cantons in the fields and even the cities, you know.
Thank you very much. I think these are really very good experiences you have made. And I think we can use the one or the other example you mentioned now also for the debate within Europe. That's so important. Coming to return, you just mentioned it. If you would like to be also successful in returning people that are not accepted, you need a good cooperation with the countries of origin. And for that, I think Switzerland is a model for having a lot of migration policies in place with special negotiations, migration partnerships with countries of origin, especially in the African continent. So maybe you could give us some ideas about that, because European Union is now focusing on having in mind more than 20 countries where they would like to get in very close cooperation for the future.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. In fact, Switzerland very much welcomes also this initiative of the European Union, because I think that a common migration or return policy could be more effective than the one we have now. Of course, migration partnerships we have with individual countries are one of the successful tools also employed and implemented by Switzerland's foreign policy on migration. Now, we have four main goals of migration partnerships. These are the following. First of all, to recognize and integrate interests of all partners in order to ensure that every partner benefits. Then second, to ensure the coherence of Swiss migration policy towards the partner country. Third, to promote the positive effects that migration can have and address challenges constructively. And finally, to encourage also a degree of stability and good governance in the partner country. Now, from our experience, the following elements are key to successfully making migration partnerships a reality. Now, first of all, it is necessary to have a mutual will of two states to cooperate fully on migration. And then the interests of all partners involved must be taken into account. They may vary, of course, but they have to be taken into account. And migration partnerships have to be designed as flexible instruments and be individually adjusted to the needs of all parties involved. So it is essential that migration partnerships promote also the positive effects that migration can have, but also addresses the challenges constructively. The goal of a migration partnership has to be defined on a long-term basis without a predefined time frame. So, I mean, you need patience. You don't have to be in a hurry if you really want to achieve results. And it is also, and this is my final point, very important to organize regular meetings between the actors involved in the migration partnership, and this at all levels. These meetings help to improve mutual understanding and create a relationship of trust by also to discuss the problematic issues. Now, this creates space for new solutions because you have to adapt maybe also your migration partnership, and this also creates opportunities that can better serve the interests of the two partners.
Thank you very much, Madam Keller-Sutter. I think what you have mentioned now is a little bit a guideline also for European Union, because you should not be very euphoric about having a success within some years. You need, of course, to build up a strong cooperation and long-term partnership with the countries of origin. But as I've understood right, you are satisfied with your migration partnerships, and you have got at the end a lot of success with that, because the trust is there and you can really cooperate with the countries of origin. That's right?
That's perfectly right. Yes, we're quite satisfied. But on the other hand, I think it would be more efficient if we could have a European cooperation. I think that the European Union and also the associated member states of Schengen Dublin together could have more impact, could have maybe could also offer more opportunities and possibilities to a partner of a migration partnership. So also here, I think a common approach would be very helpful and effective.
Of course, you are totally right. So let's look forward how the negotiations are running within European Union. As we have heard, Switzerland is also behind that. And as I've heard from your side, you think also that this pact is really on the right track, and the main issues discussed there are something where you can agree to.
Absolutely, and we really welcome this initiative of the European Commission and also the German presidency, and we really hope that we can achieve the goals that are necessary by December.
Thank you very much, Madam Keller-Sutter. I think we are at the end of our conversation. I really would like to thank you very much for your time and for your input. I think this will be a tough time for European Union, but anyhow, to have a partner like Switzerland on board is always welcome. And I really would like to use the opportunity to thank Switzerland for your work, being the chair of our steering group in ICMPD. Best wishes to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your initiative and your work also. Thank you so much.
Now let's hear from our second guest, representing the incoming presidency of the European Union, Minister Eduardo Cabrita of Portugal. Welcome, Minister Cabrita. Thank you so much for joining me today. Portugal is a highly valued and very active member of ICMPD, I'm delighted that we are already working closely with you in support of your goals for the EU presidency, beginning next January. Following on the interesting intervention of Mrs. Keller-Sutter just now, can I invite you to take the floor to tell us about the challenges of Portugal, especially in 2020, and what is currently on your agenda. Maybe you can also say a word about the outcome of the GHA Council last Friday and whether you are satisfied with that. Please, Minister.
Well, good morning, Mr. Michael Spindelegger. Thank you very much for inviting us to attend again this Vienna Migration Conference. I was there a few years ago in Vienna, and I hope, as you said, we can go through this pandemic challenge, and in the next year, perhaps I may attend again next autumn your conference in the beautiful city of Vienna. What we have now is a complete different challenge, and we are facing at European level. But I would say at a global level, perhaps the most difficult times. How to balance the answer to this global pandemic situation, how to defend health, how to defend safety of the European population, and how to balance this to write to the weak parts of our society. And migrants are among these most vulnerable groups in our societies. That's why Portugal in March decided on our domestic policy to give full rights on provisory basis to all migrants that were waiting for an administrative decision by the Portuguese authorities. That after the consequence that around 250,000 people, foreigners living, working or studying in Portugal, they were recognized full rights to access to our national health service, to the social security, to work, to attend schools, to research in our research centers. And recently, as we are now facing a second wave of this pandemic, we decided to extend these rights not only to those which applied for recognition of their rights until March, but also to those which applied for in our services until October. That means we say in this area, in these difficult times, we should be consistent with our values. That means migration is a common and a permanent challenge, and migration, especially to countries like European countries, which are facing a very aging population problem. Migration is the only way to bring young generations to Europe. That's why we give so much importance in our preparation to our presidency to an agenda of legal migration and to an agenda of preparing Europe to receive on an orderly and legal way the migrants that we intend we can receive. Portugal was the first European Union country to have an action plan on the United Nations Migration Pact. And now we have a very positive approach to the European Commission proposal of a new pact on asylum and migration. We support German presidency hard work to reach a broader consensus as wide as it is possible. And we also are working very closely with the Ylva Johansson Commissioner on this issue. If we look to the pact, we have a very important new pillar on cooperation with our neighbors outside the European Union. This external dimension of the migration issue is perhaps a new one, which is rising as a top priority, and it is strongly concerned with the ICMPD commitment to work with countries of origin and countries of transit. Portuguese incoming presidency supports German to go as far as it is possible. But we understand perhaps the most difficult issues of this pact, as the Commission roadmap said when it was presented last September, will fall in the Portuguese presidency semester. That's why we consider the relation with Africa and the relation with, especially with the North Africa countries as a priority. We should work very closely and with our neighbors, countries like Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Mauritania, working together, supporting on how they can develop their policies of local development, how they can develop their skills preventing illegal migration. That's why Portugal also on a bilateral basis proposed this year a bilateral agreement with Morocco on legal migration. We should work on legal migration and prevent the trafficking of human beings and the abuse of people on very weak situation. If you look to the pact proposed by the Commission, what are the main difficult issues? Certainly, the common work on protection of external borders. We are going next January also to have a new role for Frontex from our European Coast Guard and Border Force, reinforced with their own human resources. And Portugal, in our presidency, will all follow very closely these new developments on Frontex. And we should develop a common and weak, respecting European legal values and standard system to evaluate incoming people coming to Europe, what is their legal status, if they are condition to receive legal protection, or if we are facing a situation that we can discuss their return with the origin countries. We also have to face according to the principles of sharing responsibility and sharing solidarity, or to have a balance between positions which are different. We know that from the countries, one side, from the countries in the front line, countries like Spain, Italy, Malta, Cyprus, or Greece, which face a strong pressure and should be supported by the all European Union countries, and countries, you know, that have a more restrictive view, putting their priority on the control of external borders. I think Portuguese presidency is especially well qualified to discuss openly those difficult issues with different groups of countries on a bilateral way, but also with different groups of countries, Mediterranean countries one side, Visegrad countries in other side, and trying to build ground to reach a large field, common field for a common position. I think it's perhaps one of the most difficult challenges Europe is facing, but we cannot postpone it. Europe knows that migration will be a common issue. Now we must learn lessons from the problems we had in 2015 and 2016 when we were not unable to have a common answer. We also should thank countries like Germany and others, which put solidarity as their first priority and received a huge influx of migrants then. Now we have a complete different situation. We have some problematic points, Canary Islands on Spain, or the relation between the Greek islands very close to Turkey, but we don't have inflows that can be compared with what we had 5 years ago. That's why we should, in this time, prepare to try to work together and reach a common ground as broad as possible.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister, for this overview. From my point of view, I think everybody is very much interested how you will organize during the presidency these talks between member states, because as we all know, not everybody is in favor of the pact on asylum and migration. So maybe you could give us some ideas. Are you planning informal meetings, something like that?
First, in these last weeks of the German presidency, our priority is to support the German presidency and the hard work of the Commission, trying to reach go as far as possible. We expect last Friday in the Home Affairs Council, we had a very open exchange of views, and I think we have different positions. That's very clear. We cannot say that doesn't exist. This is one of the most difficult issues the European Union is facing. But what I may recognize is that all countries had a positive approach last Friday. That's why we support German presidency trying to make to adopting in December something like half progress report, half roadmap for the next 6 months, and we still have some hope we may go so far as possible. I think there are easier issues like EASO status or Eurodac regulations, we can maybe finish the work in these issues, even if some countries say we can all adopt the whole package when we reach a global agreement on the whole package. That's why we should and I think we are very close to reach an agreement on the principles of work with in the external dimension, work with origin countries and transit countries. And this issue, I think, is for ICMPD is a central issue. Difficult issues are the border screening and pre-screening criteria, and on the administrative proceedings, and also on the time to develop this criteria, and the issue of burden sharing of responsibility for if in case of we need to relocate migrants in the European countries, and also to develop a common policy of returns in the case we decide to apply a return policy. First, adopt this progress report and try to establish what is already decided, was already agreed, and then put all the priority in working closer with the different, the most important countries, of course, on a bilateral basis. We intend to develop bilateral dialogues with countries like Germany, France, Italy, or Spain, to speak on the countries with the larger population in Europe, and which are going to be called to have a large role in this work, but also work very closely with the groups of countries with close positions on this. And I want to speak directly with Mediterranean countries to one side and with Visegrad group on other side, just to mention two groups of countries with clear positions that we should work to put them must close. That is, I think, a difficult task, but the only thing we can be sure is if we delay to face these difficulties, they are not going to be more easy in the future. They are permanent issues, and we should work to mark a clear agenda of the Commission, supported by German presidency and also strongly by the Portuguese presidency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. You have been mentioning the more easy and the very difficult issues to be discussed. And of course, solidarity and to define the burden sharing is one of the very tough issues. What do you think? Can you speculate a little bit where could be the landing zone for this? Because everybody is interested how to solve the issue of solidarity.
My dear friend, what I heard in a very positive way last Friday was that even countries traditionally with strong reserves to the idea of burden sharing and solidarity talked about some concepts like flexible solidarity. That's why I think we should develop this concept and try to go ahead, trying to establish different ways countries may show solidarity. That's the only way to have an alliance between the ideas of global solidarity and global responsibility. Also, we mentioned that in your initial remarks, and I heard also from Mrs. Keller-Sutter that we should, in an internal way, defend the acquis of the Schengen acquis. That's why when we discuss migration, when we discuss this pandemic situation, or when we discuss terrorism, we should work to defend this idea of Schengen area as an area of freedom, justice, and security. That's why we should work together inside Schengen area. But what for us is very clear, when in last March we decided for the first time in more than 30 years to close our borders with Spain, we did that with a strong coordination with the Spanish government. But it was very clear for us, and the people understood that in that time how important is to have Schengen area working. That's why we should work together on migration. We should work together on the prevention of the health situation. We should work together on the prevention of terrorism and the repression of criminal activities inside the Schengen area. But the answer is not frozen Schengen, or even worse, destroying Schengen. That for a country which is have the largest external maritime border of the European Union, that is very clear for us. We have this maritime border, and in the other side, we have strong Portuguese origin communities in countries like France, Germany, or Switzerland. We should work on a common basis on these three fields: health challenge, terrorism, and also on the migration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. As time is running out, I just want to conclude this with the last question dealing with Africa. Portugal has very strong links to African countries, and I think I've heard from you also in the past, you would like, of course, to intensify the cooperation with countries of origin, especially with the African continent. Switzerland has done some migration partnership in the past and had good experience with that. Is there also a focus during your presidency about this external dimension with Africa?
For us, the relation with Africa is a main priority. And we are very happy that now there is a broad consensus in Europe to have Africa as a main partner. We are perhaps the most African country in Europe. We have 5 Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, and we have a historical close relation with Maghreb countries. That's why on economic development, on climate issues, and also on migration, we should look to Africa, and especially we should look to Mediterranean countries as main partners. That is a little bit like looking back to the origins of our common European culture and to the concept of Mediterranean as our common sea, our Mare Nostrum, like in Latin we use to say. That's why we are going to work together and give to this kind of cooperation a strong priority during the Portuguese presidency.
Minister Cabrita, thank you very much for taking the time to join us in the Vienna Migration Conference, and especially for giving us this overview about your plans for Portugal's presidency in European Union with the beginning of the next year. I have no doubt that Portugal will do the best, and we would like to support you, especially as our member country, and especially as we see that Portugal is very much engaged to look forward how to deal with all the challenges you have been describing. Thanks a lot for that. And of course, thanks a lot. And of course, we will stay in touch. Thank you, Mr. Minister. So far this afternoon, we have heard a lot about how difficult it will be to break the gridlock over reform of the European Union's border and refugee policy. To help us to understand exactly why the issue is so difficult, we move now to the VMC2020 keynote debate. Two very well-known and interesting European figures, Ivan Krastev and Martin Selmayr, are joining us to exchange perspectives on migration, but also on how COVID-19 is changing Europe and the geopolitical context. To see whether this will be a clash of worldviews between Eastern and Western Europe, I hand over now to my colleague, Mrs. Marlene Frankenhäuser, ICMPD's head of policy, who will moderate the debate. Goodbye from my side for now. Stay on and enjoy.